Welcome if you were with us live or watching the replay. Today's an important show, and it's especially important because we want to talk about these things before you get that first progress report home. Because many parents don't know if their child is making progress at school. And some teachers might not know if their students are making progress. Your child could be just cruising along, but not really learning much. And it kind of reminds me of the other day cruising along the highway and needing to make a lane change. And, it's like that moment where you're not sure. It's like, is it safe? Can I change lanes? And you look in your rearview mirror and it doesn't really show you everything. So you also look in your side mirror, but there's always that blind spot there. So it's really important to have all that information you need, whether you're going to change lanes on the highway or if you are trying to find out how well your child is doing at school. Because if we don't have the information, dangerous things can happen. I mean, there can be an accident, right? Or your child could just be in limbo at school and not really learning very much. So today we are going to be talking about the top 5 questions that you need to have the answers to before you get that first progress report home. So welcome. I am Charmaine Tanner. I'm a parent, an author, an advocate, and the host of our weekly The Art of Advocacy show here on Facebook. And I am excited because we have ways that we can make sure that the progress reports we get are really going to be meaningful. So if you are here with us live or on the replay, make a comment about, do you get progress reports right now that are helpful, that give you enough really meaningful information? And if so, what is it about the progress report that makes it really helpful? Or it might be the other side of the coin. Let us know in the comments if you're getting progress reports, but they're not really that helpful. They don't really talk about the progress that your child is making on IEP goals. It might be like, a 3 that they're making progress, or a PP for partial progress. So let us know, what kinds of information do you currently get when you get a progress report about your child's IEP goals? Because that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we have a bonus. It's a guide I wrote, How to Advocate for Meaningful Progress Reports. And you can get this if you are on my weekly email list. And if you aren't, I can bring up where you need to go. So go to iep.today/weekly adv tips, because I'll be scheduling it to go out tomorrow morning. And in the email will be your link for this guide. The other thing that we're doing today, and please remind me, I have not a very good memory. I'm going to be giving away a copy of my friend, mentor, coach Molly Mahoney's new book called Finding My Awesome: Confidence, Self-Love, and Joy. And it's like such a cute book. I just love it. And as many children books are, this is not only for young kids, but for all of us to tap into our awesomeness. So this will be our giveaway today. And type away in the comments so I can see how you guys are doing. I do have a PowerPoint I need to pull up here. not quite ready. My phone gave me this alert today that I had 3 minutes and the show was starting, and it was like, ah! So we will be ready because we're always ready, right? Let me share my screen. Where are you guys coming from, watching from? One of the first questions that we need to make sure that you know the answer to is who will be monitoring your child's progress on their IEP goals. Now, this could be, a paraeducator that works with your child. Maybe that person is the one that's collecting the data, or maybe it's the special education teacher, the general education teacher collaborating and writing the progress that your child's making on their goals. Or maybe it's just the speech therapist or the OT by themselves writing a report on what your child's progress is. What you need to make sure you do is to take an action step and add some language in the IEP. And a lot of times the best place for this is in that optional statement of service delivery. And you want it to be added in writing, right, in the IEP, who's going to be monitoring progress on each goal. And it's really important because what we see is sometimes the teacher thinks the para is going to be collecting the data, and the para thinks I'm just a para, I don't collect data. And then it's very confusing. So not only will this help you as a parent, but it will also help the school staff to really make it clear for everybody who's collecting which data on which IEP goal. So, hey, Lissa and Karen are here. Carrie is here. Carrie's talking about her progress report, and she says, I got some good comments that tell details about how my child is doing, but others just say making progress, 64%. Yeah, and I think that's really great that you're getting that combination of comments. And maybe it's just because I was a teacher and I always felt like I wanted to give the parents more than just kind of raw number information, which that data is important, but those comments can make it really important. And in the guide that you'll get today, when it talks about meaningful progress reports, there's a checklist I have in there of other things that can be included in the progress report that you can request to make it more meaningful. And Karen, Lissa, Stacy, hey, how are you? So make sure you know who's doing the progress monitoring. And then the next question that you need to ask, and I need to bring it up here, is how will my child's progress on IEP goals be monitored? So you can technically find this answer out in the IEP. And using your crystal ball, you will see that the answer lies in the IEP. However, sometimes it can be really confusing, and it's like, where in the IEP do I look? Most often, right after the goals are written on the IEP form, then there's a space where they talk about how often the progress is going to be monitored, if they're going to use data, observations, checklists. And so that's the spot that you would need to look into in your IEP. And you want to know that specific information. As I said, I think data is really important. And I do want to see that data compared to what the data showed us for his baseline information. But I also think it's really important to include some, like Carrie was saying, that kind of qualitative aspects of sharing information. So the raw data is really important. Work samples. I love work samples. If a child has a writing goal, to actually see what they're doing, that can tell you so much information, right? I think observations are helpful. You want to be able to have the teacher note things that she sees when your child is working that really can't be reflected in a raw data number. And so you want a combination of that quantitative information, that hard data, along with qualitative data or information. So let us know in the comments, hey Tatum, if it gets specific about the data or the work samples or the observations. How are they going to be collecting it? And Tatum is with us from Washington. Hey, Tatum. She said, hi, Charmaine. The IEP says we will only get progress, I know, 3 times a year. But the IEP CM case manager gives us monthly data gathered by para monthly in Google spreadsheet. Yeah. And that's a way that I think you can kind of compromise sometimes with the school district. And we'll be talking about frequency again in a few minutes, but sometimes school districts, if you want to get them more frequent, really give you a lot of pushback. But then one of the compromises that I've seen be really successful as I'm advocating for with families is to say, okay, give us the official progress report when all the other report cards go out to kids. But how about every month we get some information back? And what I like to do is whatever the school is using on their written on the IEP form as far as methods of collecting data, when they give me a progress report or when they give you a monthly report, is have them attach that information. So, for example, if you have data is being collected, then if you want, ask for that raw data, like Tatum was mentioning with a Google spreadsheet. But if it also says in the IEP that they're going to be using work samples to measure your child's progress, then every month have them send those work samples home too. So they get to say, we only are doing progress reports when report cards come out, but you as a parent are getting more information every month. So that is a good strategy that you can use. And Lisa says, love it. Maria's here. Hey, Maria. Yeah, so share this if there's friends that you know that need this kind of information. Hey, Anne-Marie. And Tatum is here. I'm sorry, Tamara is also here. She says, hi, Charmaine. The goals mention all the information, but the progress report doesn't provide any of that, just subjective information. Yeah, so then you really need to have a conversation with the staff about that, because there needs to be a connection, right? The dots need to connect between what the IEP says it's going to be, using for monitoring progress and what actually gets sent home. And so sometimes it's just, a conversation, an email to the teacher to say, use that Columbo strategy. I'm confused. When I looked at the IEP, it said would be used for monitoring progress. And when I get the progress report, that's not what I see. what can we do to correct this? Or what can we do so I get that meaningful information? And what I often, an advocacy mantra that I often say to families is, what we accept continues. So if we continue to accept progress reports that aren't very meaningful, guess what? That behavior gets reinforced and it continues. So we need to make sure that we are stopping that. And I'll just remind you, right? This, I'll be emailing this out tomorrow. If you're not on my email list, let me know. I can give you the link to sign up. And there's a checklist in here about what can be added to progress reports so they are more meaningful. MC's here from Massachusetts. Hey, Stacy from Washington. She said, is that raw data considered part of their school record so you can ask for it anytime and then ask monthly yourself? Yeah, cool, Stacy. I love it. That's another strategy, right? So I hope you're writing these strategies down. So, yeah, I mean, if the school really gives you a lot of pushback about changing how frequently you're going to get information or the information you're going to get, they don't want to add that to the IEP, then you kind of go through the back door because there's more than one way to get what we need for our kids. You can go through that back door and say, I would like to see the raw data that's been taken on my child's IEP goals, their progress, and you can just have that as an email that you send out each month. The thing about requesting educational records, and yes, Stacy, the raw data is part of your child's educational record, so for sure you can ask for that. The trick with asking for records is FERPA says that schools can have up to 45 days in order to produce the records for you. But that's on a national level. I know in California, and I don't think we have anybody here from California today, but in California, it's a much shorter timeline. If you request records, you get them. So you have to check with your state regs. The other thing that I have parents do, I have a template that they can use requesting records, is to, say, yes, I understand FERPA gives school districts 45 days in order, to produce the records. However, in IDEA, it talks about if there is an upcoming and I forget, I'll have to get the exact wording, but like an upcoming Iep meeting, upcoming process, that the parent can receive that information before that IEP meeting. So you might have some pushback, Stacy, because they might say, we're going to take 45 days. I don't know what Washington's state regs are on that. So yeah, that could be something that you can check out. So Tamara says, even with FERPA requests, I didn't get any data, only work samples. Interesting. Aren't students with specific learning disabilities supposed to get tested once a month to see if there's any progress? Tamara, that's, that requirement to test once a month, and I'll leave that comment up, isn't anywhere in IDEA. Tamara, what state are you in? I don't know if that would be in state regs or not, but that's something that you could look, but I don't think there's anything like that in the federal law. And I always have to say, I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but from my years of being an advocate, I don't remember that being any kind of a requirement under the federal law. And that's why it's always so important, right, to check with our state regs. But for sure, Tamara, what you can do is look in the IEP and see in there how often they're going to be monitoring. Usually it needs to be, I don't know, either, to me, I'd like to see either weekly monitoring of some of the IEP goals every other week. I don't really like to go longer than every other week, because to me that's too long of a time. And the whole idea with progress monitoring is that we want to see, one, is the child making progress, but two, what do we need to do in case it's something that might be a misconnect with our instructional strategies. And we will be talking about that too in a couple minutes. And Abigail says, do students on IEPs only get feedback on their goals, or should they also get feedback on typical classroom goals, report cards, etc.? And I think, let's see, we should say rah-rah for Abigail's question, because you are exactly right as far as, the progress reports that we're talking about today are about your child's IEP goals. But that's not the end all be all, right? Your child's IEP goals are there to help them access the general ed curriculum. And so for sure, we need to have ways to know how our child is progressing in that general ed curriculum, which will be a different show, but that's an important topic. And I don't know if Kim is here with us from Iowa, but I know Kim has been doing a lot of research on grades and report cards and information. And again, trying to get information that's really meaningful, right? So yeah, that's a great point. And Lissa says that's so common, unfortunately. My own past story, I didn't think progress reports usually entailed. Yeah, it's hard to know, right? I mean, there's so many things that happen with that with the special ed process. And that's why we do these weekly lives, so you guys get this training free. Anne Marie says, I also get a monthly report of the therapy logs. I'm able to see if activities are being done that are part of the goals. Yeah, that's another good thing. You might have heard me say before, we should have like badges that say IEP police, right? But getting the therapy notes is a great way to get some insight into what the therapists are doing with your child. And then, like Anne Marie says, to see if there's that connection between what the IEP says for what they're going to be working on for communication goals or whatever, and what the SLP or the other therapist is doing to work on those goals. So we want to make sure there's that connection too, right? So there is a lot that we need to be checking on, right? Emery says, is the monitoring of the goals if weekly written into the goals? So yeah, if so on the IEP, and Marie, if it says that they're going to measure progress every week, then that's what they need to be doing. And like I said, it could be data collection, it could be weekly, or work samples. And if they're collecting data every week, then they should, and they say work sample is one way they're going to do it, then by the end of the month, there should be at least 4 different work samples that they could share with you on that specific goal, right? So, yeah, I think you can just tell so much more when you actually look at some examples of what your child has been doing at school, right? So let's continue on our merry way here. The action step that you need to take: add language in the IEP. So whatever the school team is using to measure your child's progress, Ask for copies of that data, work samples, observation notes be sent home on a regular basis. And then you need to decide what that frequency would be, because that's something else that you would need to, check on. If they're going to provide that every month and 5 weeks have gone by and you haven't gotten it, then you need to follow up and do a friendly reminder, because what we accept continues. And if you don't want to accept that, then we need to have some conversations and make sure that changes, right? And Tatum, what's the best data to collect to show reading progress? Guessing it's connected to the IEP reading goal. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, it depends on the reading goal. Some reading goals are based on words read per minute. So that's the data that they would collect. Some reading goals are based on how many beginning consonant sounds your child knows. And so that would be the data. And what I like to do with things like that are like, these are the consonants they know, or these are the sight words that they know, is to send home that list of, so you can see, they got it right here, they missed it here, this is what they said instead of that sight word. So that raw data that they're using to then calculate the progress. And again, maybe you don't want that, so you don't have to ask for it. But as a former special ed and general ed teacher, I loved looking at stuff like that and analyzing it. So yeah, depending on what they have for a reading goal, the data is going to change. But asking for that raw data, that how they collected that, can be really helpful. Not just giving you a score, like I think Carrie said earlier, with like 64% accurate, but it's like, yeah, but show me which consonants, what vowel sounds did they know or not know? And that can be really helpful. So you guys are asking excellent questions. Keep them rolling. And we've been talking about this, right? When will I receive those updates on my child's progress? And again, if you look into your crystal ball, the answer lies in the IEP. So the action step, what a surprise. Add some language, clarify things in the IEP. And I got to make sure, am I sharing? Yes. Request more frequent progress reports. And as we've been saying, maybe it's not the official progress report that they're going to be willing to share, but to me, if they're collecting data every week, every other week, I think it's reasonable to say at the end of the month, can you share that with us? And that just becomes, kind of a routine for them. However, if you have a verbal conversation and they say, yes, that's a great idea. I mean, I remember working with one mom, and I don't know if I just told this story recently or not, but she was getting these excellent notes every week from the special ed teacher about how her son was doing. And they were really helpful. They were insightful. They had data, but they also had, just gut level what the teacher is seeing. And that continued. I mean, from the beginning of the school year until December, when the parent had a disagreement with the teacher, and all of a sudden, all that communication was cut off. And the parent came to me saying, well, can't we do something? Can I make a complaint about this? I've been getting all this information, and now I feel like it's retaliation, and it most likely could be retaliation. However, if you're a state complaint officer, you're going to look at the IEP. And if the IEP does not say the special ed teacher is going to write these wonderful weekly notes giving you all this information, you can't hold the school accountable. So when I keep saying your action step is to add language to the IEP, that's because it has to be in writing if you're going to hold the school accountable. And to change some of these things is not a big deal. I mean, you can use an amendment process, right? You don't have to pull the whole team together. Whatever decisions you make are going to be in writing, and the rest of the team has to know about it. But yeah, adding language to the IEP is probably your smartest advocacy action step that you can do all the time. Now, we haven't talked about this yet. What happens if my child is not making enough progress? Well, do we just say life goes on, no worries? Do we blame the student if progress isn't being made? Or is it time for some adult reflection? And this is like one of my pet peeves or buttons that can easily get pushed, is when we find out that kids aren't hardly making any progress on their IEP goals, that it's like, what? And so many times you'll hear from staff, well, if your child would just pay attention more, if they wouldn't be doodling when they're supposed to be listening, even though some kids listen better when they doodle. If your child would only sit down and listen to the directions, right? All these if only, if only, if only your child would do this. However, as teachers, we need to step back and say, look at this. I'm looking at this data. It's not showing me progress. What can I do differently as a teacher? Do I have to change the instructional strategies that we're using? Or are we really using those instructional strategies with fidelity? Or are we not providing that support for the general ed teacher? So when your child is included and working in the general ed classroom, the teacher knows what kinds of services, accommodations your child needs. So there's all kinds of things that we can change as adult teachers when we notice that students aren't making progress, versus blaming it on the student or just being kind of blasé about it and just like, that's okay. We'll keep rolling. We'll keep seeing what happens next, right? So let me take some of your comments. MC says, what can you say if the progress reports say progressing towards goal? Yeah, and so I'm guessing, MC, you're saying like, what additional information can you get, or, what would be something that you could do for that kind of a situation. So if it just says they're progressing toward a goal and that's about all it says on it, then an email needs to go out and you need to say, this isn't really helping me understand much about my child's progress. And in order for me to be a, equal team member here, I really need to have the information that the staff has about exactly where my child is making progress or where they're slipping and not making that. And that has to be remedied, because what we accept continues. So request an IEP meeting, have that conversation, have things written in the IEP, because that's not okay. And the other thing is, remember, you can also get my how to advocate, and I'm going to pull up the link here, for meaningful progress reports. And MC, I know you get my weekly emails. So if you don't use this link, IEP Today /weekly adv tips, so you can also get this checklist e-guide home tomorrow morning. It will be emailed to you. Let's continue. Guess what the action is? Request an IEP meeting. Because there may be needed some changes in those strategies, or maybe the curriculum that's being used, or the special education or related services. How can that switch? Maybe it's being pulled out, and maybe your child would make more progress if they got pushed in services. Maybe your child needs some assistive technology, or maybe the goals need to be changed. But something needs to happen, right? You cannot allow months to go by with your child not making progress. So many times I get calls from parents in March, and they're getting ready to go to an IEP meeting, and they're like, I can't believe it. I just got the draft IEP, and they almost have the same goals because my child hasn't been making any progress. I want you to figure this out before October because usually October is when parents get their first progress report. So now you have some time, you have a couple of weeks now, where if you don't know the answers to these questions we've been talking about, email the special ed teacher and get these answers, right? Because what we accept continues. So we're going to continue here with our last question. What happens if my child meets their goal earlier than expected? Well, I can tell you, unfortunately, what I see as an advocate so often is a goal is met, and then you see the next quarter, the progress report says again, goal met, and nobody's writing a new goal. So where's my celebration? Yes, we love to celebrate when our kids make progress, when they meet goals early, but then we have to regroup as an IEP team, and we have to write a new goal, right? We don't just leave your child stagnant at that, well, he met the goal in December, but we're going to wait till September before we write a new goal. No. New goals can be written at any time. You don't have to wait to that annual review date to update some of your child's goals. So that's really critical, is to make sure if a goal is met, that a new goal gets written and that you celebrate when your child has those wins, because so many times we are kind of in the doldrums about how things aren't working well at school. But when there are good things happening, we do want you to celebrate. Your action is to add language to the IEP and write a new goal. So those are our 5 important questions that you need to be able to answer. And we'll go through these once here. You need to know who will do the progress monitoring. You need to know how the monitoring is going to be done, what they're going to be collecting. When will you receive the progress reports? And if they're not going to be very frequent, use that back door and ask for monthly, work samples, data collection. You also need to know what's going to happen if your child isn't making very much progress. And remember, we had a Supreme Court decision a few years ago in Andrew F. versus Douglas County that says our kids need to be making more than just the minimum kinds of progress. on their IEP goals. So don't accept minimal progress. That's not what we should be seeing with our kids. And you also have to know what is going to be the procedure if your child meets the goal early. When are you going to meet as an IEP team to write that new goal? So we have more questions and comments. Let's go back here. I love when you guys are in this discussion. Lisa says, so make a big deal about progress reports and data collected. Make sure that it's implemented as part of IEP meetings. And you got it, Lisa. Because if you don't, it probably won't be given voluntarily. Yeah. And Karen from Colorado, her son isn't making progress and he gets blamed. Then I get blamed because I don't want them doing hand over hand without his consent. And yes, Karen, and I owe you a message because I know you had said something about that, and my dog just came in and is licking me. Yeah, and that's unacceptable that the student gets blamed and then it carries on to the parent not doing what they're supposed to do or something. And so, yeah, I think, Karen, you're going to be in for, I think you already know, you're in for a year of having to do a lot of education with the staff. And that's really hard because when you are that one parent voice and you're kind of up against a general ed teacher or a special ed teacher that, has been doing this for a lot of years and this is how they do things, it can be really frustrating. So I don't know, Karen, if the principal at the school is a good ally. I think you said before that the general ed teacher was a good ally. But yeah, and I don't know, Karen, if your son has a private therapist that can talk with the staff about why that hand over hand is not acceptable for your child. Because they've got to get over that. Because, right, I'm sure your son is coming home every day frustrated. And that has to stop. I mean, that, it's like, can't take that for another day. So look at what you've been doing. And if that hasn't been working, then that's our hint that we got to try something different, right? So yeah, that's like totally unacceptable, right? It's so frustrating. And my dog is still loving being here. Lisa says, when my son was moved to Utah, they moved him to a different school. And then all of a sudden he was supposedly way better progress made, like years worth in just a couple of months. It was crazy. And when I pushed to ask where the proof was, they never gave it to me. They just implemented it without giving reasons or proof why they came to that conclusion. Yeah, and that can be a problem because sometimes I think, teachers, staff want to feel that, they want to be able to tell parents, oh, yeah, he's making great progress. And if it doesn't seem right, like Lisa says, if it's like, how did they make years worth of growth in just a few months? Yeah, you have to tap into exactly what they're basing that on. And in your situation, Lisa, it was hard because because he was in Utah and, there's not that close communication. But yeah, that's, it's like really frustrating, right? And, you just have to kind of go up that chain of command. First, you always want to contact the teacher. And if you don't get any results, it depends on the kind of organization at the school. If there's a counselor that you talk to, the principal, you're still not getting results. The special ed director, you have to like up your game of going to a higher level to get things resolved. Because you can't accept those kinds of things with your kids, right? And MC says, okay, yes, email was sent and crickets in reply. Yeah, and so, the other suggestion I have, MC, is for parents to be really specific about when you want to hear back. So you can say at the bottom of the letter, please respond, within 3 to 5 business days. Or we need to look at another way to get this resolved. Because, sometimes if you're not specific about when you want them to reply, then, they'll take forever. And if you give them a specific date or, so many days and they don't respond, then to me, that's an invitation for you to go up the chain of command. Anne Marie says, and I requested notes should be shared under the appropriate goal. I can't understand the notes if all of the speech notes are recorded under one goal versus each individual goal. Yeah, and that's a great thing too. Anne Marie, it's got to be, the information has to be organized in some way that's really going to be helpful. And I bet it would be more helpful for you if they change that, but also for the other staff, right? To read those progress notes and be able to know exactly where they're coming from. And Karen said, I think the school psychologist will be at the meeting and I'm going to ask the OT to provide extra staff training. Good. Yeah, because that can be a method that the staff learned years ago and they think that works with every kid, and it doesn't. And it's harming your son. And it's not a good situation for him to wake up in the morning and go, I have to go back to that school, and this is what they're going to do to me. So you might want to check with the school psychologist and the OT ahead of time and just make sure they understand where you're coming from. And so they can be more helpful at the meeting. But that can help a lot is if you have somebody and more of an authority figure like a school psychologist. You just want to make sure that the school psychologist is on the same page with you, right? Tamara says, is any parent using Google Sheets to share with the teacher and get data more often? Would that be a good idea? Thanks. And that's a great question, Tamara. And it reminds me of the situation where I was helping a family and we had put in there that we wanted that raw data information and it was specific. Well, I think it was for all her goals, but we really wanted it for her reading goals. And the principal was like this whiz at creating Google Sheets. Actually, I think they were Excel, but same thing. And I was so impressed because he had it like this formula figured out, like, so many trials. And if she got it right, then this happened and you went to the next objective. And it was like pretty impressive. However, they were sending home these sheets at the end of the month. And it was like so much data that the mom was like, be careful what you ask for because this is like way too much for my brain to comprehend. And she's like, just give me a summary. So it depends on what you want. And that's the nice thing about IEPs, right? Is because they're individualized. So go ahead and ask for that if that's something that's going to be helpful. See what they give you. If it's too much, pare it down. If it's still not enough, then you need to increase it, right? But yeah, I think that would be a great way to share information, Tamara. And Karen says, I think I'm a dinosaur. I've never ever heard of Google Sheets. I know. And it's like Excel, but like Excel sheets are from Office, Microsoft Office, and Google Sheets come from the Google world, right? And I have never been a fan of even basic Excel sheets or Google Sheets. So yeah. And I know what you mean, Karen. I'm just making the change from using Microsoft Word to using Google Docs, which is another word processing program, because there's nice advantages of that over Word. But yeah, we get so used to using certain technology that sometimes it's like, what is this? Karen said, I set a reminder in my phone, and if I don't hear back, then I follow up stating that I haven't heard back, usually 3 days. That's a great idea. I know, it's like our phones, right? It's like, how many different reminders do you have set on your phone? It's like the best invention for. And so you're not a dinosaur, Karen. If you're using your phone to set reminders, then you have good tech skills. Don't feel bad. So any other suggestions, any ideas that you have or questions around progress reports? And as I said, getting meaningful progress reports is one piece of the story. The rest of the story is, how is your child doing in the general ed curriculum? How do we know that? So stay tuned, because we will have a future show about accessing the general ed curriculum and making progress in the general ed curriculum. And we'll be talking about that. So I am thrilled that you are here with us. If you're watching the replay, you can still type in the questions. If you don't get my weekly emails, go to that link, because tomorrow morning, you can get how to advocate for meaningful progress reports. It has a checklist in there of other information you can have in a progress report to make it more meaningful. And there are 10 questions in the bonus PDF about questions that you want to know the answers to. Today, we talked about 5 questions that you need to know. In the bonus e-guide there's an additional 5 questions that are really helpful if you know those answers too. So I am so excited that you could be with us. Tamara says, thank you so much. You're welcome. You're welcome. As a parent, I know the stress of having to advocate for your child. And yes, I was a special ed teacher, and yes, I was a general ed teacher. So I had lots of advantages, and it was still a stressful, emotional time for me when Dylan was in school. And so the advocacy skills that hopefully you are learning on our weekly lives are going to help you not only while your child is in school, but guess what? When your child is an adult. I mean, Dylan is 32 years old. I'm still having to help him, support him as he uses his voice. And so the advocacy skills that you're learning now when your child is young are actual skills that you can use as your child becomes a young adult also. So think of it that way. Hey, Paula Cluth, look at you. She said, thank you, Charmaine. Another great session. Your wisdom is gold. And I owe Paula an email. So I'm glad you guys are here. And Karen says, ooh, Paula is here. Oops. So yes. So My goal is to help you so you do not feel alone, so we can make sure that your child is happy, is safe, and learning every day besides their friends and the general ed classroom. So until next week, next Thursday at noon Mountain Time, I am Charmaine Tanner, and I am honored to be able to spend this time with you each week. So take care. And I have this cute little outro.